Task 1 writing counts 33% of your overall writing score. It's important that you get it right. In this video, we will talk about an informal and formal letter. Let's begin.
In the general IELTS test, you will have to write a letter for writing task 1. This could be a formal, an informal, or a semi-formal letter. Today, we will only discuss formal and informal. So, first, let's look at a letter format because the structure doesn't change based on the type of letter you need to write. So this is how the structure goes. First, you will have a greeting. Then you will have 3 body paragraphs. Why? Because in the question, you will usually have 3 bullet points, and each bullet point is something that you need to address, and it's a new idea. So because it's a new idea, it's better to put each bullet point into its own paragraph. After the bullet points, you will then have an ending and then a sign off and then your name. So that is the format. Now, let's look at the content of each letter. Let's start with the formal letter. So in your greeting, you could say to whom it may concern, or dear sir or dear ma'am. Why? Because if it's a formal letter, you probably don't know this person. And if you do, you still need to be formal with them. Then in your 3 body paragraphs, you could start each body paragraph with these following phrases. So the first paragraph is usually your purpose. Why are you writing the letter? So in your bullet point, in the question, it will tell you why you are writing the letter. So you could start off your paragraph by saying, I am writing to. Then in the second paragraph, you could say, let me explain my situation in detail. Why could you start off the second paragraph with this phrase? Well, the second bullet point is usually about your situation. It tells you your situation, and so you need to explain it. Now, the third paragraph is usually a request or a suggestion. So in the formal letter, you would say, would you kindly, if it's a request, or may I suggest, if you are making a suggestion. Now, the ending, you could say, thank you for your consideration. And the sign off could be yours faithfully and then your name. Of course, your name doesn't change between the informal and the formal letter. Now, what I've just given you, these phrases, of course, there are alternatives. There are many alternatives to yours faithfully. There are many alternatives to suggesting something in a formal way. But this is just a guideline. Now, let's look at an informal letter. In the greeting, you can say, dear, and the first name of the person who you are writing to. Why? Because if this is an informal letter, then you know the person. Now, the 3 body paragraphs. You can actually use the same phrases that I gave you for the formal letter. The phrases I gave you were just some examples of how you could start off your body paragraph. So, in the informal letter, you would say, I'm writing to. Now, what is the difference between the phrase I gave you for the formal and the phrase I just gave you now? The difference is the contraction. I said, I'm instead of I am. And that is a difference between formal and informal writing. In formal writing, you should avoid contractions. In informal writing, you should use contractions. In the second body paragraph of the informal letter, you could also say, let me explain my situation. Now, I just want to say this again. This sentence that I'm giving you is just a guideline. It's a way to open up your paragraph, as I've mentioned before. But there is no difference in this context between formal and informal. Both sentences are okay to use. Now, in the third body paragraph, if it is a request or a suggestion, then you could say, can you, when making a request, or I think when making a suggestion. As you can see, there's a big difference in the way you make that request and that suggestion. So now the ending. In the informal, you could say, can't wait to hear from you, or can't wait to see you, or lots of love if you're writing to a friend. And then the sign off could be your friend and then your name. So let's look at the differences. Well, firstly, the tone is vastly different. So in the formal letter, it's really polite and it's not personal. Nothing about that letter is personal. It's almost cold, we could say. But in the informal letter, the tone is warm, friendlier, and it's personal because you know the person. How can we be more polite in English for the formal letter? And just in general, if you want to be more polite in English, you could say, would you kindly contact me by 10 a.m. instead of saying, call me by 10 a.m. So as you can see, you wouldn't say this to your friend. You wouldn't say, would you kindly contact me by 10 a.m.? Your friend might think you're a little strange. But you would say to them, call me by 10 a.m. So as you can see, just using would you kindly changes the tone to formal. It makes it polite and formal and professional. And when making a request in any kind of formal situation, saying, would you mind or could you kindly, is it possible if, works really well in that kind of context. Now, what about sentence structure in a formal versus informal letter? Well, when using formal language, we use longer and more complex sentences. For example, instead of saying we went to Paris for summer, lots to tell, as you would say or write to a friend, in a formal letter you would say, we went to Paris for the summer. I have so many things to tell you. See the difference? We haven't shortened any words. We're not using any slang. Now, there are differences in language when it comes to formal versus informal. For example, it's better to say obtain instead of get in a formal letter or an academic essay. You could also say provide instead of give. It's not a big deal if you use get in a letter or give, but listen to how much better provide and obtain sound. It sounds more formal and academic. So learning these differences in language is crucial when it comes to any formal versus formal essay, letter, task, and even context. For example, in your work context, in an email. So keep that in mind and learn those differences. In future videos, we will go through more examples of formal versus informal, and this will help you for your letter and for your essay. Now, what mistakes should you avoid for Task 1 General IELTS? Number 1, not knowing the differences between the informal and formal letter, not writing at least 150 words, or writing too many words. Now, you won't lose marks for writing too much, but you will put yourself under unnecessary pressure because, as you know, your time is limited and you may not be concise enough in your letter if you write too many words. Because if you write the same idea multiple times, but just in different words, you are essentially going around in circles. And that means you're just not being concise and you're not fulfilling task achievement in the band descriptors. 170 to 190 words is my recommendation for task 1. And lastly, not planning your letter. Take a few minutes to just write down what you would like to say in each body paragraph. The letter is short, so you don't need to spend too much time planning it, but I suggest you do plan it, because when you plan, you're actually generating ideas. And once those ideas are generated in your planning phase, you then can focus on other parts of the letter, like vocabulary and grammar. Do you now know the difference between a formal and informal letter? Tell us in the comments. And if you found this video useful, then please like and subscribe for more. I will see you in the next one.